This is the book Winchee, Mission Stories of Colin and Melva Winch by S Ross Goldstone. The true adventures of missionary pilots and nurses in the South Pacific, as retold to the children of Watertown SDA Church. I'm your storyteller, Austin Bacchus. Let's go!
The first chapter this week is entitled, Nauru to the Right? In 1970, the Bismarck-Solomon Union Mission, abbreviated as BSUM, was presented with a brand new Piper Aztec twin-engine airplane. Pastor John Lee, who had been youth director for the BSUM, had promoted Adventist aviation. After many negotiations, this ministry offered to purchase the plane for the BSUM. On arrival, the airplane was dedicated in Rabaul and named the J.L. Tucker, after the originator of the Quiet Hour program, which had donated a lot of the money. This was a godsend to the BSUM, but they had no one qualified to fly the plane. As Colin was a full-time pilot for the CSUM, the Coral Sea Union Mission, and he had previous experience flying the Piper Aztec airplanes, he was invited to add the responsibility of flying for the BSUM to his work for flying for CSUM. This meant increased time away from home, but as they were then located in Lae, where the children were able to attend school, Melva was able to obtain paid employment as well. After time with this arrangement, because the airplane belonged to the BSUM, the new president, Pastor Gordon Lee, decided he needed to have the plane based in Rabaul, so he called Colin to Rabaul as a youth and health director of the BSUM. The Winch family were happy to return to the Union of their first appointment in mission service. The J.L. Tucker was used in long-range trans-ocean flying to New Caledonia, New Hebrides, which is now called Vanuatu, Nauru, the Gilbert and Ellice Islands, which are now called the Kiribati and Tuvalu Islands, throughout the Solomon Island missions, and on numerous occasions to Fiji, transporting students to and from Fulton College. The flight to Fiji would take 7 hours, and the flight to the Gilberts would take 7 hours via Nauru. Colin found this to be interesting flying. A flight north to Tarawa, capital of the Gilbert Islands, via Nauru was planned as the recently appointed Pastor Gordon Lee wished to pay a visit together with Max Miller and Ted Jones, some of his department leaders. Colin, the pilot, would also represent the Youth and Health Department. The flight to Nauru would take 4.5 hours with full fuel. The endurance of the plane was 5.5 hours, but 6.5 hours if Colin set the engines for long-range flying. This he did. This would give several hours buffer with fuel in reserve. Months earlier, 6 drums of aviation fuel had been ordered from Australia to be shipped to Nauru, and notification was received that these had arrived. On takeoff, the plane was carrying the maximum legal weight and was taken to the 7,000-foot cruising height on course for Nauru, depending for the accuracy of their flight on radio direction finding beacons located at Honiara and Nauru. However, there would be several hours when they would be out of range of either beacon. Colin tracked out for around 160 miles on the Honiara beacon before losing contact. After flying for another 90 minutes in beautiful weather with a glistening sea below, the Nauru non-directional beacon began to show up on the instrument panel of the Aztec, and the needles of the radio compasses swung to indicate that Nauru was straight ahead. After about an hour more of flying, both Gordon and Colin noticed the needles were beginning to turn slowly to the right, indicating, if they were to be believed, the Nauru was coming past them on the right-hand side. "Winchee, look at those needles. We're off course. Nauru's out on the right-hand side," exclaimed Pastor Gordon. "Can't be," replied Colin. "We haven't been in the air long enough yet." After another 20 minutes of flying, the needles were pointing at right angles to the direction in which they were going. Still later, they were pointing slightly behind, indicating the airplane was now well past Nauru. Nauru is only a tiny island and not easy to see, as the highest point of the island is only about 60 feet above sea level. Still, because of the time that it had elapsed since they had departed, Colin was certain they had not yet reached Nauru. "Are you sure, Winchee? Shouldn't we turn and follow the direction of the compass needles?" questioned Gordon with consternation in his voice. "I'm sure Nauru is dead ahead, Gordon. We have not been flying long enough to reach the island. We will keep going on our present course," responded Colin. "You better be right," muttered Gordon as he looked out over the expanse of water below. He knew the plane was fitted out with a 6-man inflatable life raft, life jackets for all on board, and survival rations, including plenty of water in case of a ditching, but the possibility of ditching was not one that he looked forward to. Colin was convinced there was something faulty with the 2 radio compasses in the airplane, even though both were indicating that Nauru was now behind them and to the right. 30 minutes more of flying, and in the distance they could see a little cloud indicating there was land ahead. "I'm sure Nauru is under that cloud," Colin told his passengers. True to his word, as they neared the cloud, the little island of Nauru appeared, and suddenly the 2 radio compass needles swung back and pointed dead ahead again. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, and tension within the plane dispersed as they made a safe landing on the paved airstrip. Colin paid a visit to the control tower to ask what had happened. The officer apologized. saying they had forgotten to turn the beacon on until shortly before Colin landed. The group spent the night at a local hotel and met with the Adventists who were working at the phosphate mine on Nauru, and then flew on to the Gilberts. Much later, on returning from the trip, Colin had an aircraft radio technician check out the radio compasses in the Aztec. He found whoever had originally fitted them had done so incorrectly. Both radio compasses were working off of just one antenna instead of each having their own individual antenna. This had caused the compasses to read incorrectly, and if Colin had not chosen to ignore these bad signals, he could have resulted in a major catastrophe. The fuel dump at Nauru was extremely important because even with long-range fuel tanks fitted to the airplane, there was not enough fuel to have the safe reserves required for their destinations. 44-gallon drums of aviation fuel, or avgas, were continually being shipped to Nauru. On one flight, Colin arrived at Nauru to find out that the pilot of another aircraft had stolen all of their stored fuel. This was a real challenge. There was sufficient avgas in the Aztec to get from Nauru to Tarawa, but not enough for the required reserves. In desperation, it was decided to upload regular automobile fuel into separate tanks of the airplane, but not to use it unless it was absolutely necessary. In that way, the flight to Tarawa was achieved, the fuel emptied, much to the delight of the local mission president, and the tanks refilled with avgas. God had his hand over all these matters, and Colin saw evidence on a daily basis of his leading, protection, and blessings. The next chapter is called Animals in the Family. Animals were often part of the Winch family. Dogs, cats, birds, and a possum were all loved and cared for at various times. Carrie was particularly fond of animals and recalls them all being loaded into the plane when the family was transferring from Lae to Rabaul. During the flight, the possum climbed up on Colin's shoulder. Fortunately, the plane was on automatic pilot at the time, so it didn't hinder his flying ability. On returning from one of their furloughs, the family had acquired 2 guinea pigs. Carrie was determined to take them with her to Honiara, regardless of the warning that these prized pets might be confiscated by quarantine authorities either in Australia or on landing in Honiara. A zip-up bag became the animal's temporary home, and the flight from Sydney to Brisbane proved no problem, but an overnight stopover in Brisbane was the next hurdle. The guinea pigs were smuggled into the hotel room and spent the night in the bathtub. Carrie plucked some grass to make sure her pets didn't starve, and duly took them outside in the morning to allow them to run around, feed, and toilet. The flight from Brisbane to Honiara was the next drama. When the authorities were informed of the plan to take guinea pigs on the plane, the family were advised it would not be permitted, but they were referred to the man at the gate. This gentleman was pleaded with in appropriate terms, but when he adamantly declined permission, Carrie burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably. She was inconsolable. Her precious pets were confiscated, and she knew their lives would be taken from them. So great was her grief that the man at the gate was almost in tears himself. The door of the plane was about to close when the gentleman rushed in, strode up to Carrie's seat, and thrust a box containing the guinea pigs into her arms. "Here, take these. Put them under your seat. Don't let anyone know they're there." And with that, he made a hurried exit from the plane. On arrival at the airport in Honiara, Colin informed the Solomon's quarantine officer that they were bringing guinea pigs with them. "Pigs! Pigs!" exclaimed the officer. "No, guinea pigs," replied Colin. The officer peered into the box with the 2 multicolored guinea pigs. "Emi no pig, emi pussycat," he said with a puzzled look on his face. "No," assured Colin, "they're guinea pigs." The still confused officer just waved them through. Guinea pigs are prolific breeders, so the Winch children sold the offspring to other expatriate children living in Honiara. Unfortunately for all the guinea pigs, they were allergic to the DDT chemicals which are sprayed on all expatriate homes to prevent malaria, so the Winch children soon lost this source of income. Pastor Gordon Lee was given a coconut lorikeet by one of the nationals, which he managed to tame, and he named it Rosie. Rosie learned to talk and used to annoy Gordon's daughter, Michaela, by constant chattering while she was trying to read. Michaela would tell her to shut up, and the birds soon picked up the words, repeating over and over, "Shut up! Shut up!" When the newly built Western Pacific Union Mission headquarters at Honiara was being opened, the Governor-General of the entire Solomon Islands was one of their guests. He was standing in the family home with his back to Rosie's cage, speaking to the family members while Rosie repeated over and over, "Shut up! Shut up!" When the Lees left Honiara, they bequeathed Rosie to the Winch family. This colorful, tiny terror would fly all around the mission compound during the day, but return home at night. The bird knew which office Colin worked in, would fly in the window and sit on his shoulder. If he was on the phone, Rosie would sit on the headpiece, purportedly listening in on the conversation. Naughty Rosie struck fear into the hearts of all the Winch children except for Nerily. Nerily loved Rosie, and Rosie loved Nerily. At the end of each day, Rosie would tap on the shut door with its beak, demanding entry. Nerily would open the door, pick up the bird, while the rest of the children scattered back to their rooms. The flooring in the home was of polished timber and could be slippery under certain circumstances. One evening, young Chris was a little slow to run away from Rosie. In desperation, he lost traction before skidding down the long hallway toward his parents' bedroom. Grabbing the opportunity with both claws, Rosie gave chase, half flying, half waddling after him. Chris slammed the door and Rosie crashed into it, unable to stop in time, then proceeded to tap on the shut door, all the time saying, "Naughty Rosie, naughty Rosie." At bedtime, Narrowly would share her bed with Rosie. The bird would lie on its back on the pillow with its legs in the air, and Narrowly would cover its body with a sheet, and the two would sleep together. One can only imagine the smile on naughty Rosie's face.
Be sure to tune in next time for more stories from the book Winchee by S Ross Goldstone, which is available at the Adventist Book Center. And meanwhile, check out these videos and others on my channel, with many more mission stories and Bible skits for kids and adults. God bless you.